Hey, what is going on, guys? So, Mikhaila Peterson recently uploaded a TED Talk that she did for TEDx, which is essentially the YouTube channel for TED Talks, the official one. And the reason she uploaded the TED Talk to her channel was because TEDx actually refused to upload her TED Talk to their channel because she had violated some of their content guidelines.
Hey guys, as you may know, I did a TEDx talk in the summer about my experience with the Lion diet, the all meat diet that put my autoimmune disorder that caused crippling arthritis and gave me 2 joint replacements into remission. I followed TEDx's guidelines very carefully as I'm aware my experience with diet is anecdotal. I finished the talk asking the medical system to look into the diet further. We spent the last 4 months going back and forth with TEDx because they won't post the talk.
She was very confused as to how her talk violated their content guidelines, and also pointed out that of all the talks that were given at the TED Talk conference she went to and gave her talk at, her talk was the only one that was not uploaded and that apparently violated content guidelines.
I was the only talk from that TEDx conference that they refused to post. They said my talk went against their community guidelines, but couldn't name exactly what it went against. And it didn't. Like I said, I was really careful.
So essentially, Mikhaila believes that her talk did not violate their content guidelines. So I decided to do a little bit of digging as to what TEDx's content guidelines are concerning science and scientific claims, because as you guys know, if you've seen many TED Talks, there is a lot of TED Talks that contain many things related to science, where studies are cited, etc. Before we delve into what those specific guidelines are, you can either take my word for it or go watch her TED Talk itself, but in short, it was purely anecdotal, and she didn't cite any paper supporting the carnivore diet, not even that super cringe Harvard paper that literally admits that they did not objectively assess diet, nutrient status, health-related outcomes, or confounding health-associated behaviors, and no physiological or biochemical measurements were obtained. They also said that instead of obtaining that data objectively, everything was self-reported, which in turn means that the data used was also prone to recall and reporting bias. She did cite that paper in her video going over how TEDx refused to upload her talk.
Since then, Harvard has put out a study on the carnivore diet that I've linked below, showing other people who have also had success putting their diseases into remission.
And to be fair to Mikhaila, she did make it a point in her talk to say that she thinks the medical community should look further into the carnivore diet and that she clearly thinks more research should be done. But after reading TEDx's content guidelines, you will see that she did indeed, in her talk, violate their guidelines. And to be clear, in her video going over how TEDx didn't upload her talk, she quickly scrolls through many other vegan TED Talks that have been uploaded, pointing to how these videos have claimed that veganism cures disease, and the implication is that she violated their community guidelines just as much, if not less, than the vegan TED Talks that have been uploaded, which leaves her confused as to how they refused to upload her talk, but uploaded the vegan talks.
This is something that should be taken seriously and looked into. TEDx is supposed to be a place for new ideas and novel thinking and anecdotal reports. They have tons of vegan talks claiming veganism cures diseases, but my story didn't make it through because it violated community guidelines they can't name.
Now, I'm not going to go ahead and watch every single one of the vegan talks she showed to verify if those talks violated TEDx's content guidelines just as much, if not more, than Mikhaila's talk. That very well could be the case. I don't really know. Maybe TEDx isn't actually consistent in their application of their guidelines. What I want to do today is instead see if her talk did indeed violate their guidelines. Also, it's kind of funny, if you go through her comments, you'll see many of the comments are saying things like, oh my God, like the world is just against me. And there's these very big conspiracies. And, some people even, I'm sure, judging from what they said, think that, oh, TEDx is this vegan agenda platform, and that they won't promote anything that's even relatively pro-meat. Whether or not this is true, I don't really know. Seems pretty overly conspiratorial and probably unlikely to be true. But anyway, let's go ahead and read those guidelines. So here we go. Science is a big part of the TED universe, and it's important that TEDx organizers sustain our reputation as a credible forum for sharing ideas that matter. It's not always easy to distinguish between science and pseudoscience, and the more willing a speaker is to abandon scientific underpinning, the easier it is for them to make attention-grabbing claims. This is especially true for talks that call on science for support, but do not come directly from the scientists themselves. Claims made using scientific language should be testable experimentally. So of course, in hindsight or in the future, much of which she talked about in her anecdotal experience cannot be testable experimentally. Next, have been published in a peer-reviewed or respected journal. Nothing she said was published in a peer-reviewed or respected journal. Based on theories that are also considered credible by experts in the field, she did not point to any evidence of the sort. Be backed up by experiments that have generated enough data to convince other experts of its legitimacy. This, of course, has not happened as well when it comes to the carnivore diet. Have proponents who are secure enough to acknowledge areas of doubt and need for further investigation. She did end up saying that there needs to be further investigation into the carnivore diet. So to be fair to Mikhaila, she did end up doing this. Not fly in the face of the broad existing body of scientific knowledge. I mean, in some sense, the carnivore diet does actually fly in the face of existing bodies of scientific knowledge, given how much we know red meat is associated with disease, even when many confounding factors are taken into account. Be presented by a speaker who has the right scientific qualifications. Show clear respect for the scientific method and scientific thinking generally. I would say she generally did this given that she said that she believes that there should be more investigation and that nothing here is conclusive. All right, so claims made using scientific language should not be so obscure or mysterious as to be untestable. So she didn't say anything like really weird or hippy dippy or use any language like positive energy or chakras, so I'll give it to her there. Be considered ridiculous by credible scientists in the field. Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that most credible scientists do think that avoiding eating vegetables is pretty unreasonable, and thinking that fruits and vegetables are not good for you is pretty unreasonable, which is what many of the carnivore diet crowd like to advocate for. Now, when it comes to what Mikhaila Peterson is postulating, which is essentially that the carnivore diet may be a solution to many people who have autoimmune issues, I personally have not seen any credible scientists in the field think that this is a good idea or something that we should consider for people with autoimmune disorders. Next, be based on experiments that cannot be reproduced by others. I mean, basically the only experiment she cited was her own case study and her own anecdote. It would be pretty hard to reproduce this exact experiment she went through. I mean, this is the main problem with anecdotal evidence, but anyway, let's keep going. Be based on data that do not convincingly corroborate the experimenter's theoretical claims. So, I mean, if we're going to use her own anecdotal data and I guess the data of the unverified 1,000 anecdotes in the carnivore Facebook group as her data, and we're going to see if that data corroborates the experimenter's theoretical claims, and we'll consider Mikhaila, I guess, to be the experimenter with the theoretical claims. I don't think it's reasonable to say that that data convincingly corroborates their claims. The data is quite weak. So I would say in this case, she definitely is violating this guideline. Come from overconfident advocates. I will say that she technically wasn't overconfident in that at the end of the speech, she did say that more research needs to be done. So that doesn't really apply to her. Use oversimplified interpretations of legitimate studies. Again, no studies were really used, which honestly is its own fault in itself. Include imprecise vocabulary, phrases like quantum consciousness, personal energy fields, crystal healing, and the like should be considered major red flags. Thankfully, she didn't use any of those terms. I mean, if she did, the carnivore diet would be looked at as more of a joke than it already is. Abandon evidence-based thinking or be dismissive of the scientific method. She didn't necessarily do this. She acknowledges that what she did was purely anecdotal. So guys, I do think that her talk did violate some or even enough of their guidelines such that it was justifiable to refuse to upload her talk. Again, even though Mikhaila acknowledged multiple times that it's purely anecdotal, we need to do more research, the problem with talks like this, at least from my perspective, is that many people will see this talk and then begin to just start trying a carnivore diet. It doesn't matter if Mikhaila says something like, oh, this is purely anecdotal. People are very moved by anecdotes. And if they hear this specific little anecdote and this anecdote isn't backed by a myriad of data like TEDx requires, then you're going to have many people just end up trying this not backed diet in which there could be a higher chance of cardiovascular disease. Because I mean, literally the carnivore diet is where you decide to consume solely meat. And of course, as a consequence, your saturated fat's going to go up. And we know what happens when it comes to your saturated fat and your LDL. And of course, I know carnivore advocates don't believe that saturated fat actually increases LDL or that LDL causes cardiovascular disease. Well, you're going to have to take that up with the science, which clearly states that there is a causal relationship between increased LDL and cardiovascular disease. Anyway, guys, that is the end of the video. Again, I don't know if TEDx is consistent in their application of these content guidelines. Maybe some of those vegan talks that Mikhaila ended up citing also violated some of these guidelines such that TEDx should have not uploaded those specific vegan talks. I don't really know. My point here was just that her talk clearly did, and that she should not be surprised that TEDx did not upload her talk. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who's your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe